books by the newspapers and the Democrats.
Well, in fact, it was information shared with U.S. commanders on the ground in Afghanistan. Joining me now is Susan Rice. She was National Security Advisor under President Obama. She would be in the room as the president received his intelligence brief daily. She's also the author, we should mention, of Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For. Ambassador Rice, appreciate having you on the program tonight. I want to ask you, what consequences are there for U.S. national security when you have a president who blows up when he hears critical information or intelligence about one of its primary adversaries, Russia? What does that mean for the safety and security of this country?
Well, Jim, the advisors to the president, particularly the National Security Advisor, but also the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Chief of Staff, Director of National Intelligence, their job and my job was to brief the president, to bring to the president all that he needs to hear, not what he wants to hear, not that it's nice to hear. And in fact, when I served President Obama, he would sometimes joke that I and others who brought bad news were the doomsday people, but he always listened to what we had to say, and he never conveyed the impression that news was too bad to be worthy of him hearing. You don't intimidate the messengers. You welcome the message and you get to the business of solving the problems and resolving the threats that face the American people. And this president is derelict in his duty as commander-in-chief to brush off information that is critical to the life and death of our service members, and do so just because he doesn't want to hear bad news.
You know better than anyone that intelligence is rarely unanimous or 100% clear. And you said that if, as National Security Advisor, you received even raw reporting that Russia was paying Taliban fighters to kill U.S. service members, you would have walked right into the Oval Office to brief the president. Is there any reason that you can see to justify not raising intelligence like this directly to the commander-in-chief?
There's absolutely no reason, Jim. When it comes to our men and women in uniform, in a war zone, in harm's way, and one of our arch adversaries, in this case Russia, escalating their hostility towards the United States by actively paying Taliban terrorists to kill our forces, I would have walked into the Oval Office as soon as I saw that information, and even if it were pretty raw and unverified, I would have said, Mr. President, we have immediately here some very troubling information that the Russians are paying the Taliban to kill our forces. I'm going to run this to the ground. I'm going to work with the intelligence community to figure out how strong it is. In the meantime, we're going to work on options for you to respond appropriately to Russia, and we'll get back to you when we know more. You don't fail to tell him. And Jim, let me just say, I don't believe that they didn't tell him. I believe the more we've learned about this, that when this information came to light in 2019, early 2019, which is now what we understand to be the case, I'll bet a dime to a dollar that my predecessor, John Bolton, did just that and walked into the Oval Office and told him what he needed to hear. I think they're obscuring that. They've prevented him from talking about it in his book. And now those around him who don't have the backbone that Bolton had probably were too scared to tell him when it was put again in the president's daily briefing. This is the top intelligence product. Everything in that is meant for the president's eyes. He doesn't read it, but the National Security Advisor has the obligation to make sure that he at least knows what's in it.
Let me ask you this, because the Washington Post is reporting tonight that President Trump has decided already that this is not actionable intelligence as it can be described, meaning he's not planning any response to it. He's made that decision already.
How can he make a decision, Jim? Think about this. First of all, it's not important. Then it's fake news. Then it doesn't merit his attention. But all of a sudden, he knows enough to know it doesn't merit action. This all does not add up. We have known about this in some form or fashion for over a year. It does not take the intelligence community over a year to come to an assessment about the validity of something of this importance. They come to an assessment, they put it in the PDB, they put it in the wire, which, as you know, let me tell your viewers, is a document, an intelligence product that goes to everybody with a clearance in Washington and all over Capitol Hill. So you don't put something out with that kind of dissemination without the intelligence community having a certain significant degree of confidence in it. So the president is denying and deflecting from his responsibility to protect our troops. And I think it's one of the worst breaches of his responsibility that we've seen to date.
One of the most consistent features of President Trump's foreign policy is, frankly, deference to Russia. You've seen it in a whole host of decisions, and I've asked senior members of his administration repeatedly to explain that, and they can't. They can't. They'll shake their heads, frankly, at that. How do you explain it? And do you suspect that he is not willing to confront Russia?
I believe he's not willing to confront Russia. Look at the pattern. It goes back before he was elected president. He called on Putin to interfere in our elections, to hack Hillary's emails. He praised WikiLeaks. He denied the fact of Russian interference in our election on his behalf. He obstructed the Mueller investigation and then distorted its findings. He met with Putin in Helsinki and took Putin's word publicly over our intelligence communities. He withdrew U.S. forces precipitously from Syria and allowed literally Russian forces to take over U.S. bases. And more recently, he called on Putin, he invited Putin to join the G7 again over the objection of our allies. He ordered the withdrawal of nearly a third of our forces from Germany without ever consulting with the Germans, which is a huge blow to our bilateral relationship and to NATO and a huge boon to Putin. And now we learn that even when it comes to the life and death, the blood and toil of our soldiers, he could care less to even hear that the Russians may be doing something nefarious, which of course they are. So add all that up, and it is mind-boggling, and one cannot help but question, what are his motivations? Why? Is it money? Is it something that they have on him? Is it some fascination with Putin and his power? There is something that must explain this. And I don't have the answer any more than his advisors do, but it's deeply, deeply troubling when any president would put loyalty to somebody in a foreign government or to a foreign government above the health and safety of American forces.
Let me ask you this before we go, because of course, you know, you've been mentioned as a possible running mate to Vice President Biden. I know you're not going to comment on the process, but I will ask you very simply, do you want the job?
Jim, look, as I've said before, I'm deeply honored and I'm humbled that I'm reportedly among this group of extraordinary women who are being considered for the job. I've also said that the most important thing in my mind and for this country is for Joe Biden to be the next president of the United States and for the Democrats to control the Senate as well as the House. And that is what we need to right all of these wrongs. The fact that, you know, our foreign relationships, our leadership in the world, the quality and integrity of our government, all of the challenges we face with coronavirus, the economy, race, all of these issues need strong, principled leadership of integrity. And that's what I care about. And as I've said, I will serve in any capacity that I can to help advance that objective of Joe Biden becoming our next president and then to help him succeed if he does become president.
Susan Rice, we appreciate you joining the program today.
Thank you, Jim.
Coming up next, President Trump stoking the flames of racial division once again today. As we touched on, he is calling a proposed Black Lives Matter mural in New York, in his words, a symbol of hate. But his press secretary insists, no, you read his tweets all wrong. We're going to have more when 360 continues.